Hey guys and girls, today I'm here with content creator Madison Estes. Hey Madison, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Yeah, this is a content creator, a YouTuber I've been following a little bit recently. Share her with you guys today and we can find out a bit more about her and what she does on YouTube and on other platforms. I encourage you guys to follow Madison's channel on YouTube as well. So I'm going to start off with a pretty basic question. If you can just tell me a little bit about what you do on YouTube, what is your channel?
Okay, so my channel is pretty much anything that is related to horror. It started off as a writing channel back in 2020 because I was teaching a horror writing class and I wanted to kind of put some of my content out there so people knew what to expect from the class. And then I started watching a lot of other author tubers and horror tubers, and I was like, I really like what they're doing, and I enjoy watching writing vlogs, seeing how their process is and how their projects come together. And of course, who doesn't watch, movie reviews? So I started to do just book reviews and writing, and then one year I got a little bored with that and started to do movie reviews. And very recently, I started doing some gaming videos as well. So at this point, it's just anything that's related to horror or to writing.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed there's a little bit of a mixture in there, but on sort of a theme. So you've sort of answered why you wanted to do it. Like, was it just a bigger platform to get yourself out there, your creative voice, that kind of thing?
Yeah, the Writing Barn, which is in Austin, Texas, they were very nice whenever I queried them about teaching a class, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we'd love to have you. We've never had anyone teach horror here." So basically it was to increase my platform, to give a couple of like demonstrations of what my class was going to be like. I did a video on what is villain decay, which I'm planning on some point updating because those early videos, oh man, if you go back to the beginning, they're not really good. I'm working on a camera from like the early 2000s. No microphone.
Yeah, we've all been there.
I didn't even have a tripod, so the camera was just like literally propped up on a cardboard.
Okay.
But the content's still pretty good, so I'm gonna redo those. But yeah, just videos on like villain decay, character agency, and things like that. So that was how I got started, was teaching horror writing and horror themes and things.
Yeah, it's always trial and error when you start out on YouTube. Yeah, some of my early stuff is pretty ghastly. So yeah, we've all. How long have you been doing the teaching now?
So I've done it off and on, and sometimes it's paying, sometimes it's more to entice people to get to have an editor, which is what I do, and then sometimes it's just for fun or for my friends. Yeah, I would say just a couple times a year. And I recently taught a class on flashbacks back in May, I want to say, for my writing group. And I'm going to be teaching another horror class in October. And I don't know if you've heard of Pro Writing Aid, but they're also going to be having me for a horror panel and to be teaching another horror class. So pretty excited about that.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that's a good opportunity. And that does sound like a fun class. I mean, sign me up any day. That does sound good.
Any class where you get to talk about The Walking Dead and Stephen King's work, I think, is a fun class.
Yeah, a bit of a walk in the park. That's cool. So just going back to your channel then, like, how do you come up with ideas for videos and stuff? Because I've noticed you've got quite a broad range, and I notice you go for like little niches a little bit sometimes. Yeah, so
most of the time it's just whatever I happen to be interested in the moment. Like I'm really interested in cosmic horror right now, so that's probably going to come up soon. And I'm also thinking I might do more general videos that are appealing to everyone. Like again, like what is cosmic horror? Like video game people like that, writers like that, readers like that. So I kind of want to make more broad videos going forward because I think that that's just really interesting. And there's a lot of people even that aren't huge horror fans that are still interested in that kind of content. So I'm trying to go a little bit more general going forward, but I'm still going to be posting reviews and writing videos and things like that. But yeah, a lot of times it's just, whatever I'm working on. So I'll post some writing blogs here and there. I do a lot of short stories, so I think that that's hopefully satisfying to see someone start off with an idea, and then at the end of the video, there's at least a rough draft that's done. I know I like watching those kinds of videos. It's just very satisfying, I think, to get to see the whole process from beginning to end. So a lot of times it's just whatever I'm working on or whatever I happen to be reading. I was on a Junji Ito binge last year, and I actually still have some videos of his that I did that I need to finish editing and upload. So it's just whatever I happen to encounter and become obsessed with for a while. That's usually what ends up on the channel.
Yeah, because I remember the first one of your videos I checked out was the trends one for like this year, and that is a different way to look at things. And is that something you do every year and try and keep a track on?
Yeah, I've been doing that since 2020 or 2021.
Nice.
Let's say 2020, but yeah, I think that was part of my horror class. Actually, was horror trends, and I just thought that it was interesting. I don't remember what it was what trend I noticed in particular, but I was like, that's really interesting, and maybe I could talk about that in my class. What things are like really popular to write about, because writers are obsessed with that. They're obsessed with what's trending. Although it's funny because whatever happens to be trending, once you actually write a book about it and try to get an agent or try to get it out there, most of the time it's already kind of plateaued a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's still fun. It's still fun to just keep track of it. And that's what I do. I have fun with it. And I actually noticed a new trend, which I'm going to talk about in my horror trends video for next year, of cliffhangers, like cliffhanger endings in movies. Like First Omen kind of has almost a MCU feel, like Damien will be back in part 2.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, so it's just fun to kind of keep an eye on that and see what's going on, both in horror movies and books. What kind of things are popular?
Yeah. No, interesting. So, is there like a particular video that's your favorite on the channel that you would recommend people check out?
So my most famous video is What is the Yandere? And I think that that's one that a lot of people have fun with because it is kind of an unusual concept. Basically, it's someone that's like a stalker with an obsessive crush, and they also tend to have like violent tendencies. But the video is pretty funny, I think.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of jokes and humor in it. So I think that would appeal to everyone. And that's one of my favorites. On my Instagram, I have a bunch of pictures of me taking goofy pictures because I'm like splattered in blood and stuff on the thumbnail. So that was a lot of fun to do. I like some of the reviews I did of Carlton Melick's books, like Stacking Doll. Again, just silliness, just, me telling the story in a very comical sort of way. And I also really like, the Black Phone review too. That one's pretty goofy. I'm like talking into a banana like it's a phone. So that was silly. There's some scary movie humor in that. And I've really enjoyed doing the video game videos. So much that I think I might even do a separate channel because I don't want to overload this current channel with just video games because I know there's a lot of different people that watch it for different reasons. But I've just enjoyed doing them so much and just being totally goofy, which is a little different from like the horror trend videos, that some people like. So I might be doing both, but I'll still definitely keep up doing video games on this channel sometimes because it's fun. And I think it's fun to have a variety of things too.
To bring a bit of a humor to these things. And you also need to, it's good to come across as just like a regular person as well, who just likes to have fun and talk about stuff that you enjoy, rather than being a like too serious. You sort of need that sort of balance.
I mean, a couple years ago, I literally dressed up as a house to give a book review on.
There you go. There you go.
Just a paper house. So I mean, I don't think this channel's ever been too serious, but but yeah, there's some videos that are a little bit more serious and a little more focused on like academic discussion of films and stuff. So
Yeah.
now and then you just got to dress up like a house,
Yeah. Now and then. Yeah. When you're in the mood. When it's house season. Yeah.
when it's house season.
When the market's good. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So sort of any tips or any ways to improve if you're a YouTuber?
Let's see. Posting consistently, which is my great weakness. I will go through long periods where I just get distracted with things going on in my life, or if I get really into writing and and I don't happen to be blogging for that particular project, then I'll also forget to post for a while.
Okay.
I think that's the most important thing. And also, like I said, trying to keep your niche happy. And if you want to post something that's wildly different from what you've done in the past, then you can experiment with it. But if you notice that you tend to be losing subscribers, then I would consider doing the second channel. I did poetry one time. I have 2 poetry videos that are still up. And I noticed that I tend to lose subscribers.
Dear. Yeah.
Because poetry is that unpopular.
Everyone seems to rag on poetry for some reason. But.
So I decided, even though that is technically writing, that I would go ahead and I would either make a separate channel for it if I felt like I wanted to keep doing it, or I would just stop. And I ended up just stopping, which is fine. But so just keeping an eye on what kinds of things people like. What you want to do too, though, because again, posting consistently is, I think, the most important thing. And if you're posting videos that you aren't enjoying making anymore, then you're going to post less, and then
yeah.
So I think that's the most important thing. And every now and then dressing up like a house, I think.
We're back. Yeah. Well, you should do the house franchise dressed as house, really, like a different house for each review. I think there's like 10 of those films as well, so that would be interesting.
Yeah, and that needs to become a regular staple on the channel. I'm missing out on that. So.
Go for it. So you mentioned games before. What do you look for in like a good horror game? Do you have a favorite subgenre of horror game?
So lately I've been really into games that are about like liminal space, which is loosely a very vague definition of that is like space that is transitional and that is usually empty of people, and it's spaces that you don't think of hanging out in, but just simply like passing through. So like a subway or a train or like a slide. I actually recently just played a game called Slide in the Woods that the graphics aren't great, but it's really cool because you go down the slide and at one point it's daytime, and as soon as you get down, it's nighttime. So that was kind of weird and creepy. And then there's another part where you go down that slide and it just doesn't end, and then you end up waking up like in some weird ancient temple.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so liminal space games where you feel isolated, and then I also just really love zombie games. I have ever since I was a kid, and I saw Resident Evil or watched my dad playing Resident Evil because I was too young and too afraid to play it. I have since played it, but yeah, when it first came out, I was too scared. But yeah, so those are my preferences. I also really like it when a horror game doesn't scare you when you're expecting it. Like there's certain beats where it's like, oh, I went through this whole level and nothing's jumped out at me, so something's definitely going to jump up right now. And then it doesn't, and it waits a little bit longer so that you're finally like, is anything going to happen? And then it's like, oh, shoot. So a good jump scare is always appreciated.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So just speaking about horror in general, because you said you're, into horror movies and stuff, what were some of your favorite horror movies growing up? What got you into horror? Which movies?
So the very earliest I can think of is Nightmare Before Christmas, which was pretty scary and gothic, and just that aesthetic, I think, appealed to me. It did scare me a little bit, but it also appealed to me. My my parents used to watch Tales from the Crypt, and I
Oh,
remember
nice.
kind of like sneaking in there to kind of watch it in the hallway. So it'd be like, Madison, go back to bed, and I'd be like, just 5 more minutes. I loved the Crypt Keeper. I thought he was so cool.
He's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and to this day, I love like horror tales that are like morality tales or satire.
Yeah.
And when I was a little bit older and was allowed to actually watch horror movies, I really loved Resident Evil and Ghost Ship. Those were two of my favorites. First of all, they both have amazing openings, but also they have strong female characters. And it's really funny to see people talking about it now, like, oh, Black Widow was the first, superhero, the first strong female lead character, or, Katniss was the first real superhero, female superhero. And it's like, no, we had Ghost Ship and Resident Evil when I was growing up, and those characters, especially Resident Evil, they were kind of like superheroes. So, yeah. And then, of course, Ripley from Aliens.
Absolutely. I was going to mention her, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's kind of silly. But yeah, so those were some of my favorites. And I think those are what got me into horror. And also, I remember Pet Sematary left a mark on me. One of my friends told me the story before I saw it, and it freaked me out. It was a sleepover, and she told it to me like it was a ghost story, and it really scared me. And then I found out it was actually based on a movie, and so I had to watch it. And, yeah, it really appealed to me.
Okay, so just speaking about something you brought up there when it comes to like horror movies adapting like horror video games, what do you look for in a good adaptation from like a video game to like a movie or TV show or whatever? What?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of video game adaptations that have been successful. Obviously, The Last of Us is incredible. But yeah, not too many. And I did like Resident Evil. I know a lot of people didn't like the adaptation because it's not true to the games, but it is true in spirit. And I watched the movies before I played the games, at least the first couple. So, yeah, so it didn't bother me. But yeah, I mean, I think an adaptation, a good one, stays true to the spirit of the game. I think that if you pull the characters, or even if you use the right costumes and you have actors that look right, if it doesn't have the same spirit of the game, or doesn't use the same things that made the game appealing, like if the game uses a lot of jump scares and the movies don't do that, then it's just not going to feel right. But I do think there's some cases probably where if the video game doesn't have a lot of plot, then the movies could use that opportunity to create that. And I think that we haven't seen too much of that. But I do think that that's the potential that the films have going forward, I think. And I think that probably will happen, especially as more and more things get adapted. This year's been crazy. Speaking of, well, not horror trends, but just trends in general, Fallout, Borderlands, Super Mario movie last year, just so many games are getting adaptations now. And it's actually really exciting. But yeah, I think that that's probably the key, I think, to a good adaptation. And just, no matter what, just telling a good story.
Yeah. And I think you need a way into the story regardless of whether you know the games or not, because like with The Last of Us, I've never played the game or anything, so I'm not a hardcore like fan of the game, but I really got into that show and the story of it and everything. So it sort of shows, I think, that most of the hardcore fans at least seem pretty happy, but also casuals like me seem to like it as well.
It definitely needs to be accessible to everyone. And I'm in the same boat as you. I also haven't played that game, but I got into it right away. I think they did a fantastic job. And then one of my friends who did play the game, he said that there's a lot of scenes in the movie that they just took straight from the games, like everything, even the viewpoint. And so they did an amazing job adapting that, for sure.
Yeah, and it seems like the changes they did make were just necessary to adapt it for a TV sort of storytelling type form a bit more. So, yeah, most people seem really into that show, so that's cool. So, sort of how do you think horror has changed really since you've been watching it? Like, have you noticed any positive or negative changes?
I've noticed a lot more, let me think how to put it, a lot more horror dramas, I guess. Like, I think Mike Flanagan's had a really big influence on
Okay.
horror the past few years with The Haunting of Hill House. So I've noticed there's a lot more like family dramas that are also horror films. Not that he's the first or anything, but just that I think that there's a lot more.
Mm.
And there's definitely a lot more demon horror the last several years, like possession, demonic horror, which I'm for.
Okay.
I'm all on board with that. Yeah, how else has horror changed? I think those are the big things. I think that now it's not enough to just have a bunch of jump scares and scare people, or even to just have a really gory film. I think most horror fans, including myself, want a story that has substance and wants plot twists and character development and just really good storytelling, and not just satisfied with a couple of cool gory deaths. I mean, I'll still watch it, but but like if it's good enough for me to review it or to get really excited about it, at this point, it really needs to have a really valid story. And one of the things that I say in one of my videos is that if you take all of the horror elements out of your story, is it still a cohesive story? Like, does it still make sense? And that's one way that I think you can kind of test your story to see if it has depth and substance, is if there's still something there even after you take those elements out. Now, there's a few stories that wouldn't pass the test that are excellent movies, like Halloween and Friday the 13th and things like that. But like things like Haunting of Hill House, like even if you took the ghosts and stuff out, that's still a fantastic story about a dysfunctional family dealing with the death of one of their own. So I think that that's the kind of thing that a lot of horror fans are really into, and I think that that's one way in which horror has changed recently. And another big thing is legacy characters coming back, which is a trend that is still going on. Like Reagan's mom from The Exorcist was the new Exorcist mom. Sally was, well, the actress passed away, but they recast her for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Which was like, why? Because she's only in a couple scenes, and spoilers.
Yeah, and she's kind of she's kind of douchey as well in that film. No spoilers, but she's very douchey.
Yeah, and you think she's going to come in and be a badass like Jamie Lee Curtis, and she dies.
It's really not.
Completely pointless death. It's like, oh man. So that's an example of how not to do it. But I do think that the new Halloween remakes, minus the controversy of the last one and the things they did with it, I don't think anyone could criticize Jamie Lee Curtis's performance and how important the character was in those films. So I think that that is something that is going to stay for a while in horror films, for better or worse.
For better or for worse, yeah. Well, you definitely, I mean, speaking of that, I think definitely the success of, like, the first one of that trilogy has definitely led to more slashers coming back, you know. We probably wouldn't have had this run of slashers coming back if it wasn't for the box office and that, like, Halloween 2018 got. But yeah, it's always interesting because I think horror has a long history of kind of moving with the times or having kind of social or political context, or because I think when you go back to that original Halloween, one of the things we say on our channel is that it was one of the first big ones to like take the horror out of like Gothic type castles and sort of into the suburban area, and kind of the idea of the darkness lurking underneath and that kind of thing. So that was exciting for the time, and to really create the final girl trope the way that movie did was really exciting too. And yeah, just nailed it with the casting in all three roles, really, the three big roles. I mean, three of the best horror characters ever, I would say, in that movie. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point about them bringing it out of the castle and into everyday life. I never
Hmm.
thought about it, but yeah, that's really the film that did that, and that's pretty important.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was going to ask you about legacy characters, what you thought about it, because it's going to be interesting with the next Scream movie. Obviously, like that's something we're going to be talking about on my channel quite soon. But it's definitely a bit of a gamble, that one for me, because it did seem like Nev Campbell's story was told in that franchise, and that they should have let her sort of ride off into the sunset for a while.
As tropey and cliche as it is, for that particular series, I would like to see her and her child. The character canon has a child or not. I think so. They just haven't
I
showed
think
them.
she
But
does, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to see Ghostface go after a kid. I think that could be interesting, which would kind of be a little bit like Halloween, but I think they could go in a different direction with it. And I have to admit, I would watch that for sure. But yeah, if
Okay.
they're not gonna bring the next generation into it in that way, then I think that they should keep going with the direction they're in now. Even though didn't they fire that one actress?
Yeah,
That was
that's messed up. Yeah, like I'm not. Yeah, and it's why I'm not going to watch Scream 7 in the cinema. It's a bit of end of an era, because I've seen all 6 of the previous ones at the cinema. I'm showing my age now, but I saw the first 2 actually twice at the cinema when they came out. But yeah, so this is the first one I'm going to wait for streaming, basically. But
me too, probably, because I don't know where they're going to go with it, because both of the sisters are out. So I'm like, I mean, they're bringing Nev Campbell back, I think, but I
yeah,
don't know. I'll see. I'm going to wait for the trailer before I decide.
sure.
But yeah, that was not a wise decision. But I think I have a feeling they'll be back at some point. So when all the
Yeah,
political controversies die down and everything.
yeah, it's sort of a shame, really, though, that they didn't get to finish their trilogy. I think they deserve to, really, and because I was quite middling on 5, but I thought 6 was quite a big improvement on 5, and I got more into the main characters in 6, so I was hoping that they would get to close off that sort of trilogy, really. But
Yeah, I was hopeful too because I'm in the same way. I didn't like 5 that much, but 6, it felt like the characters were finally starting to like that the series was finding its footing again, and that the characters were becoming interesting.
yeah,
But you know, these series never die, so I feel
no,
like
no,
at
no,
some point,
not while there's money in it, no.
yeah, at some point the rights are going to get sold to someone that didn't fire those actresses, and then so I hope that.
Definitely be on board for them bringing Kirby back. I think they should bring her back.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I would in the lead. I mean, I know it's not going to happen because they've got Nev back, but that's what I would do if I was making the shots.
Yeah, I would too. I like her a lot, and she's a pretty famous actress, so I think she could carry it. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's only really been in a couple, so it's not like she's been like. There's still story to tell with her, I think. So
Mhm.
yeah, you never know. She might come back. We'll see. And I'm still pushing for that Screaming Space movie. That's what they should go. Because then you can reuse the Alien tagline for a Scream movie, which would be pretty cool.
Yeah, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah,
That would be really funny.
yeah,
Yeah, that would be. I mean, that would be fascinating. I kind of thought it was weird they were bringing it to New York and the city environment, and that turned
yeah.
out to be one of the best things the series has ever done. So I don't know. I'm not gonna scoff at it. We'll see.
Cool. So, speaking of TV, as we were a little bit earlier, do you have any favorite TV shows? What sort of TV do you like?
Horror shows or
Yeah.
anything.
Well, in
Um,
general, yeah. Any
Well, I've been really
recommendations?
into Futurama. I've been binging that
Okay.
again lately.
Cool.
Um, as for horror shows, I still have to watch the Walking Dead spinoffs, but I was a huge fan of that when it was on. And then
Okay.
I stopped watching whenever a certain main character died. Um, but I went back and finished it, and it was pretty good. Obviously, The Last of Us is one of the best things that's been on TV in years.
Recently, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, I really loved that. And Black Mirror, I love that show too. That's one of my favorite shows ever. I love how it blends horror and sci-fi perfectly, and it's kind of like a modern Twilight Zone, where like every episode is different, every episode has its own moral.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's really good quality horror television, and I liked American. Uh, oh my gosh, what's it called?
Is it a horror
American
story?
Horror Story. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, okay.
I liked it. It has good and bad seasons, though. There's
Yeah,
some
I've
really good
heard
and
that. Yeah,
for me. Yeah, I haven't seen Delicate yet. I do plan on watching it just because I'm a completionist at this point.
absolutely. Yeah, you've got to be. Yeah, really.
Yeah, that's a pretty good show. Um, yeah, so
Okay.
that's about it for the moment. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. But, oh, and I really liked Black Summer when it was on. It only had 2 seasons,
Okay.
and the second one was so-so, but that first season is one of the best horror shows I've ever seen. It's just a zombie apocalypse movie, and it's kind of like a ensemble cast, which I thought was
Hmm.
really interesting. Getting to see the point of view of a bunch of different characters and how their stories all intersect wasn't something you've seen too much of in the horror genre or the zombie genre. So I thought it was a really interesting approach that they did. And of course, there's just really good zombies in that show.
Okay.
Much scarier than The Walking Dead because they're fast. So yeah.
Yeah, I've
So
heard a few people mention that. It's on
mhm,
Netflix, isn't it?
mhm, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll put it on the list to check out, definitely. Actually recommend you, I don't know if you've heard of this show, but it's a good UK horror show called Red Rose. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay. I'd recommend that. I think that's on Netflix as well, but that's actually from some of the same writers as Bly Manor,
Oh,
which
okay.
came out, or a gem, which probably, because it was like a BBC show over here, so I don't think it got so much attention. But yeah, I'd recommend checking that one out.
Yeah, I'll
Pretty
add
sure
that one
it's
to my
on
list.
there. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I think it was something you sort of said earlier, but is it like a challenge, particularly on your channel, to try and balance like these different things like horror gaming, horror books, horror like films?
Yeah, for a while I was just doing movie book, and then every now and then I throw a writing video in. So with the writing ones are a little bit more challenging because for a book or a movie review, I used to write notes and like long paragraphs of what I'm going to say, which you can tell in the early videos when I'm reading
Yeah,
transcripts
yeah.
or reading notes. Now I'll write just a couple things to remember. But yeah, it's much easier to just sit down and do a review than it is to set up your camera, write for a little bit, talk about what you wrote, put the camera up, and then bring it back out for a few more days, however many days I'm writing. Um, so I don't do those as often. And also, I've gotten a little bit lazy in the last couple of years, and I haven't done as much writing. But yeah, it can be challenging. So I just try to make sure that I post about an equal amount of writing and horror movies. Again, the horror movies was just because I hadn't read anything good in a while, and I
Sure.
liked some of the movies that I had seen at that time, and I just wanted to talk about them. So there wasn't a plan going into it. I was literally just winging it and having fun. And now, like I said, I'm not super strict about it having to be 50-50, but I just try to make sure that if I've posted a lot of one type of video, that, okay, the next thing I post should be something that appeals more to the literary people. Um, and moving forward with video games, I don't know how much I'm going to be posting those because the same thing happened again that happened with the poetry, where immediately a few people left. But
Okay.
I've gained them back. I've gained a few more followers since then, so at least I'm breaking even.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, but I am gonna go a little bit slower with the video game videos in the future, just trying to maintain a balance of different things. And I might do the second gaming channel so that I can post as much as I want without having to worry about things like that.
Yeah, not a bad idea. When it comes to writing, how did you get into like writing short stories? What made you want to do it?
So as a kid, I've always wanted to write, and Stephen King's On Writing, I'm sure there's a lot of people in my generation that can say this, but his book on writing was a huge inspiration for me that made me want to write. So I've been doing it most of my life. And as for short stories, I think I read somewhere that that's a good entryway into getting an agent, is to have things that have been published traditionally by like small presses, and then you start querying. I'm not sure if that's actually the case anymore. So I write now for enjoyment, because I don't actually think that that's a huge incentive or a huge advantage to getting an agent. Mostly they just want to know you have something that's well written and marketable.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That was but that was initially my motivation. And then I discovered Horror Tree, which is a really good website for finding publishers that are looking for certain types of stories. So sometimes I would write short stories specifically for a certain submission call. And then sometimes I would just write a good story and try to find magazines and things like that that would accept something that didn't have a theme they were looking for. And I've been somewhat successful. I haven't been publishing or writing as much the last couple of years, but I am pretty close to feeling as though I have finished my short story collection, and I have a few publishers that are interested in it. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also working on my first novel, trying to get that finished as well.
Excellent.
I'm really bad about getting interested in another story and then forgetting about what I'm working on, but I'm getting closer, and I'm only have like probably one more story I need to write before I feel like I'm done, or feel like I have enough for a short story collection. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and do you just want to mention some places you've been published? Because I know you have had a few stuff published, a few things.
Yeah, I've had several stories published in Hellbound Books. They published one of my most famous stories, Plus 30 Seconds, which I got a lot of positive feedback from people I'd never spoken to before. And even one person reached out saying they wanted to turn it into a short film, but then I don't know, something would happen with him and his company, so it didn't happen. But it's about a woman that discovers that her microwave is a portal to another dimension, and she's able to send messages back and forth with someone by writing on paper plates. And
we've all been there.
Button. Yeah. And she ends up finding out that that girl's being abused, and she tries to help her, and then it backfires and something very terrible happens. But so Hellbound Books published that story. I've also been published in Transmundane Press a couple times. Soteria Press. All I can think of off the top of my head. I know there's a few more. Oh, Mad Scientist Press. And a few more that are not coming to me at the moment. It's been quite a few here and there.
Yeah. And what do you think the main difference is between doing a short story and trying to do like a full-length novel? What's the different disciplines?
So a lot of people that, I think I mentioned I'm in a writing group, I'm actually in two. A lot of people that I've witnessed their process when writing, and a lot of times they don't know how to end chapters on like a cliffhanger. Of course, some of them are like memoirs and things like that, which aren't as demanding as like horror and thrillers. But yeah, and then also just knowing where you're going with it. Short story, usually I have a pretty clear idea of where it's going when I start it. But with a novel, even if you have a pretty clear idea how it's going to end, it's okay, well, how do you get to that point? You know, what's the middle going to be? How do you keep it interesting? How do you have enough plot twists or at least unexpected things that happen to keep someone continuing to read? And that's always been the part that's most challenging to me. I'm pretty good at beginnings and endings and having a general idea of how you get there, but once it comes to actually writing the middle part, which happens to be the most important or the biggest part of the story. There's moments where you have difficulty figuring out how you transition from one part to another. And I think that's the most difficult thing about writing a novel. And it's the biggest difference between short stories, too, because short stories, usually there's so few scenes that when you need a transition, you just write. And then the next day or something, the sun rose and then this happened, whereas with a novel, you usually need to have a little bit more transition between, your chapters or your scenes or whatever. So that, and again, the discipline, the sitting down and sticking with one story, much easier to do that with a short story that you write in a couple days, whereas a novel is a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And quite a bit more commitment. So that's the main difference, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of planning like a short story for like Halloween season, so I'll keep you posted on that. And
that's awesome. What's that about?
At the moment, it's going to have something to do with a supernatural sort of closet. So different.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, different things going on in the closet depending on the day or something like that. That's the general idea. And
I love that. As the person that wrote a haunted microwave story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love the idea of a horror story in a closet.
There's great. A niche there. Yeah. I'll keep you posted. I'm hoping to do a live read at some point during October, so I'll keep you posted.
Definitely do.
So just a bit about like publishing online and stuff, like, because online culture has really changed things like publishing and things like that. Is it something that you find there's more opportunities out there because of that, or is it harder, or is it just different sort of challenges than before?
Honestly, I wouldn't know, because I have never, all of the submission calls I've ever received were online, usually Horror Tree. There's another website called Publish to Death that has listings that aren't just speculative fiction. That was another good resource. But yeah, I've never really seen a submission call that was like, I guess, old school, you'd say. But I definitely think it's more accessible now. Because I believe in the old days, I hate using that word, you see submission calls like in the back of a magazine. And if you don't have access to that magazine because you don't live somewhere where they sell them, or you don't have money to buy them, or things like that, then you don't ever see the submission call. And there's sort of a cost barrier, and it's a little bit more of a gateway, I think. Whereas nowadays, I mean, it's much easier to start a small press. It's much easier to get submission calls out there because of websites like Horror Tree. And I was an editor for one collection, Hellbound Press, and E.R. Bills reached out to me and asked if I wanted to guest edit. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. And it was. And we used Horror Tree to get submissions, and we got like over 100. And I don't know if we would have been as successful doing that if we just used the old school methods. But yeah, I think that it's definitely made it easier for anyone to be able to submit a story and to be able to see, a greater amount of publishers at one time, instead of only submitting to places that you read or that you've happened to come across their magazine. And I think it's a lot easier for publishers. I think it's much easier to start a collection despite not having any experience publishing before, because of those kinds of websites. So I definitely think that it's opened more doors than the old school way. But again, I'm biased because I've only been submitting.
Sure, yeah, I get that. Do you look for in a good sort of short story? Any ideas?
A good plot twist. I love a good revenge story too. One of my favorite stories is by E.R. Bills. It's called Recumbent Female Nude, and it's about a guy like Brock Turner, who was convicted of raping an unconscious woman. It's a guy that's just like that, and he takes this woman who's a prostitute and he uses her, like rapes her basically, and she manages to kill him somehow. I won't go into too many spoilers on how it happens, but basically he chokes to death, and it's just a really good revenge story.
Sure.
A little bit of satire in that too, and that it's talking about like a real life case and things like that.
Yeah.
So I love a good revenge story. I love satire. I love ripped from the headlines kind of stories. And I definitely, back to satire. I think some of the best horror stories are commentaries on things that are going on in our society, whether that's women's rights or, just general basic human rights. I think that horror is a really good mechanism for getting your point across. Again, Tales from the Crypt. I grew up on that, so for me, horror and political commentary just go hand in hand.
Yeah, HBO back in the day.
Yeah. So that's a big thing, and I also really like character-centric pieces where something significant happens to the character by the end of the story, and they are in some way changed by the events that happen in the story. And sometimes that change is just simply that they died. but I definitely prefer stories where something happens. Either the character grows as a person, or maybe they start to grow and then they backtrack a little bit. And because they backtracked, something terrible happens. I think that's a really interesting way to kind of put theme into your story. So I really enjoy that as well. But yeah, definitely character growth or change is really a good way to make a short story feel satisfying.
Cool. Speaking of Tales from the Crypt, have you ever seen the 70s movie? I take it you probably have.
Probably, although I don't remember.
It was a while ago, yeah. Yeah, it's worth checking out if you haven't seen it. Quite a few faces in it. Like Peter Cushing's in it, I think. A few different people, but it's a good one. It's worth checking out.
Okay. I will. I think I want to rewatch the show too. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Yeah, I've only seen a couple of episodes of the show, but I hear it's pretty good fun. There was a channel I follow that reviewed it, the whole thing, a few years ago. So
it's not quite as good as Black Mirror, in my opinion, because it's more on the morality tale side than the political commentary side. But it's still good. Still good.
Yeah, different kind of show, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, sort of just to round up, really, like, do you have any future ideas for your channel? What can we expect from you in the coming months? Content.
So for the most part, I'm gonna keep posting, my movie, book reviews, a few more video games sporadically, slowly integrating that into the channel. I'm gonna do a video on, I think I mentioned Villain Decay. It was one of my oldest videos. I'm planning on redoing that one.
Okay.
Now that I'm much better at filming content. More of the same. Some trope videos, maybe some more writing videos as well. So yeah, no major changes, and I'm gonna keep posting things like horror trends. At the end of the year, I always do best and worst horror movies or books. Although I don't think I've read enough books this year to be able to fairly do that video. So movies it is. Kind of a year in review type video. So I'm just gonna keep doing that, and probably not going to be any major changes other than the gaming videos for a while. Just give people some time to accept that, and just keep posting my regular content.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the game ones are fun. I've checked out a couple. They are fun.
Thank you. They're fun to film too.
Cool. Okay, so that's everything for today, Madison. Thanks for joining us. It's been a good chat.
Yeah, it has been a good chat. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. We will definitely do this again in the future, and I will share out your links to your work and your channel and everything in the description. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you, and we'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again for having me.
Murder, madness, mayhem, and that's just the fun part. Welcome to the from the man who gave you 48 hours. Revolting, but so current. Need a little holiday feel? Shall I scare up the man who framed Roger Rabbit?
The killer is here!
You asked for it. You got it. Screaming for more? I have this little number from Superman's Supermaster.
They sought to kill you.
Doc, no!
I wouldn't count on it, but you can count on my directors. 3 Tales from the Crypt, June 10th on HBO. It's a night to dismember.
Warning, strong content. Parental discretion advised.